Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our BDO Rethink conference today. This is the second session of the manufacturing and distribution breakout sessions, and thank you for joining. The pace of change in the business world has increased steadily for years, but for many businesses has really kicked into overdrive this past year. For manufacturing businesses, the need to invest and evolve to remain competitive has never been more front and center. Today, we'd like to explore both sides of the invest or divest decision with our panel. Today's conversation will likely spark a couple of questions of your own about your company's journey with digital transformation and technology implementation. We encourage you to fill out the diagnostic tool pinned to the right of this chat after the session or conference, to find out where your business stands and to continue your conversation with BDO and our panelists. And we encourage you to leave any questions or comments about our discussion in the chat function as we go through. So to introduce myself, today I'm your moderator. My name is Jamie Windle. I'm a partner within BDO, and I lead a couple of areas. One, I lead our transaction advisory services practice, and my concentration is financial due diligence. So, on a day-to-day basis, I am helping companies buy and sell other companies and helping them think about the risks and how to mitigate those risks as they think about going through a transaction. And today I'd like to introduce, 4 of our panelists to cover both from from an invest perspective. And we've got Matt and Paul, who I'll talk a little bit more about in a second, in terms of, how do manufacturing businesses invest in the future from a technology perspective, which Matt is going to address. And Paul's with our government services or government incentives practice, which can give some guidance on, how to pay for those incentives. And then we've also got to join us here, and again, I'll go into a little bit more detail on each of these individuals, Dale and Cameron. So Dale is a senior investor with the Canadian Business Growth Fund, who invests directly into Canadian businesses. And Cameron Percy's on the advisory side of the M&A world, and he helps clients go through that transaction. So maybe just thinking, I assume everyone can see the same screen I can, which is sort of, I'll start at the top left and start with Dale. So Dale helps to lead the CBGF, or the Canadian Business Growth Fund, investment team's activities in origination, execution, and portfolio management. Having grown up in an entrepreneurial family, he enjoys partnering with ambitious entrepreneurs and helping them take their business to the next level. With 18 years in private equity, Dale's invested $750 million in over 50 companies. His investments have ranged from early stage companies to large growing enterprises with thousands of individuals. Moving across me and to I assume is my right, which is Matt. Sorry, maybe there we go. Matt is a partner in BDO. He leads our Greater Toronto Area Toronto Advisory Services team, which is focused on digital transformation and value creation. He is a leader in transformation and emerging technologies with over 23 years of cross-industry experience delivering process improvement, business model development, function strategy and design, technology due diligence, outsourcing, governance, and risk management. He has worked globally with public, private, and non-for-profit organizations with a diversity of industries, including process and discrete manufacturing. So Matt's here today to help us talk about what are some of the investments that manufacturing firms are thinking about. And then down to, continuing sort of clockwise in this circle of our panelists, Cameron Percy is our director in our transaction advisory services team. He's an experienced M&A advisor and works with business owners and investors to take them through the process of selling their business, acquiring different businesses, or raising capital. And where he'd like to spend most of his time is working with manufacturing and distribution businesses advising on deals across Canada. And finally, but not least of all, by any stretch, is Paul Boucher. He's joined us obviously from somewhere where there's paddles in his life. Paul leads BDO's government incentive practice, focusing on advanced manufacturing technologies. The government incentive team specializes in providing professional services to assist clients with a comprehensive approach to funding their innovation and growth initiatives. With over 30 years of automotive industry and consulting experience in advanced manufacturing technologies, engineering, product and process design and development, and operation management, Paul specializes in enhancing client value through the implementation of Internet 4.0 technologies and manufacturing intelligent practices. So that's the panel we're going to be discussing with today, and we've got a number of questions to go through to sort of kick us off here today. But if there's any questions in the audience, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and we'll be happy to address them in near the end of the session. So maybe to start us off with, why don't we talk about this one? What should business owners consider to decide whether now is the time to invest or divest? And Dale, maybe if you can sort of lead us off with that question, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jamie, and thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure, and although I can't see the audience, thanks. Nice to meet you. Jamie, I just wanted to go back to your opening comments because I really agree with one of the statements you made. It's that the rate of change is adding weight to the idea that you're either moving forward or you're falling backwards. So, when I started doing this, we'd see a lot of lifestyle businesses, but now we're seeing people that are deciding to stay in lifestyle mode. It's probably a decision that you're going to lose ground over time, and probably quite rapidly given how fast things are changing these days. But to address the question, Jamie, that you asked is, the decision to invest is really a risk decision. Are you as an individual, are you ready to double down financially and emotionally to do what it takes to kind of keep going and kind of level up your business? So, there's a couple of things that when people ask me this question, I run them through some questions. Like, so what does a business owner need to think about whether they want to, is it time to sell or should they dig in? And the first one is, what's your timeline? There's timelines within an industry. There might be a window to make change or you're really going to fall behind. And then there's your personal situation, because it's not just about making change. You actually have to show results before you can capitalize on it with a potential investor or someone you want to sell to. So timeline is very important. The second part is, how complex is what you want to do? If this is more like, I have an existing facility, I just want to fill it up, that's probably less complex and less risky, probably takes less time. But if it's a really complex digital transformation, or you want to create a new product line or something, or international expansion, that's a different risk profile. And so you got to consider that too. Third, probably should be number one, I just have them out of order, is, given 1 and 2, do you have the energy and passion to take this on? Related to that, do you have the stomach to take on this kind of, this personal commitment and financial risk at this stage of your career? I guess at the end of this, if you can look in the mirror and probably look at your significant other and say that you have the time and the passion and risk tolerance to go for a big step forward, then you're probably a candidate to be in the invest group. But if not, and that's fine if you're not, you should really think about divesting and how you're going to optimize the value of what you've built.
So I agree, and hi everyone. Jamie, thanks for having me here again. I agree with everything Dale said, but that kind of moment of self-reflection and that objective assessment of what you want and where your business is at, I think is the critical first step. And often, when you're sort of head down running a business, it can be a long time before you take that step and you step back and and ask yourself what you really want. And in some ways, this year has actually provided the opportunity to do that for a lot of us, both sort of in our business and personally, to say, what do we really want next? At the same time, I think, it's important to understand what options truly exist in the market. So we can map those against what our personal objectives are and understand, make an informed choice as to where we'd like to go next. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, the invest side might be clear. That roadmap might be a little easier because they're in there every day running that business. The divest side is sometimes less clear for business owners, and that could mean selling 100% of the business to a competitor, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. The world of buyers and investors in North America is really diverse, and it's increasingly large and incredibly diverse. And so in many ways, the objective today when it comes to a divest strategy is not necessarily just about finding capital. There's actually lots of capital out there. It's actually about finding the right fit, finding that partner that is going to help the business grow from here and to the next level and sort of continue to evolve, as Dale said, as opposed to just sort of standing still. And lastly, just from a market-facing perspective, I think it's really helpful for a business owner to understand what drives value in their business from a market perspective, and that can be different from what makes it valuable to you as the person that owns the business today. And that understanding what drives market value, that's really at the heart of any M&A strategy, whether it's to go out and buy a business or sell your business or merge with another company. Understanding what drives value in your company is sort of at the root of it. And that's the case whether you're looking to sell in the next 6 months or 6 years from now. So that, like I said, I think the core is really understanding what drives value in your company today and what will drive value tomorrow.
Well, thanks, Dale and Cam, for sort of kicking us off in terms of those responses, in terms of when is the right time to think about investing or divesting. And I think, Cam, your end statement about what drives value, maybe that plays into a nice sort of follow-on question, which is what do we see the M&A market looking like right now from a value perspective? How has the market performed this year during a crisis, and how do we see it playing out into 2021 and the years ahead?
Sure, thanks. So like most industries or economic charts, if you look at them, there's a graph that just takes a hard drop. So when we look at M&A data in the year so far, while private company transaction data always needs to be taken with a grain of salt, at least sort of the data we see and anecdotally as people that work in the industry every day, there was a pretty hard stop on transaction activity through the early summer. But as we got into sort of midsummer and into the fall, things really picked up again. And then I think that's a function of this kind of what this episode of economic tumult is. There's actually still a lot of different players looking for deal activity. And so many of us were expecting to see a huge flood of deals kind of hit the market in September. And I don't think we really saw that, though, activity was still steady. And I would attribute that in large measure to the second wave of the pandemic that came along this fall, the U.S. election, and a bunch of things that were just uncertain. And all of those uncertainties, I think, pushed a lot of people to just say, again, let's wait and see what happens and see how the fall sort of pans out. Now, from a valuations perspective, and I'm speaking strictly from a private market perspective because I continue to not understand what's happening in the public market, but that's not my domain. But from a private company perspective, valuations have held relatively steady, maybe off sort of what they would have been last year in terms of EBITDA multiples, but they're relatively similar. I think what we have seen change is deal structure. Deferred components or sort of non-cash at close components of deals have always been there. They've always been a tool of deal making, especially in the mid-market. But they're even bigger and more prominent in deals that we're seeing now, where you're really looking for buyers and sellers to share risk, and a big part of that is deal structure. In terms of next year, Jamie, obviously we're all guessing, but I think 2020 changed a lot. We've all said it. Much has changed about our lives, but when I think about the things that were driving a lot of that M&A wave, they're still there. The huge wave of business owners that need some kind of succession solution is still there. In fact, it might be bigger now that people are feeling like they need to do something after this last year of challenge. The pool of capital sitting on corporate balance sheets with private equity investors, with individuals, the capital out there looking for opportunities is still there. So while I think the deal process might change, due diligence will change, things might look a little different, structures will vary. I continue to think that there will be a very strong market for M&A deals in the manufacturing sector next year.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Cam. I think that's that's a lot of good information. When I think people hear a lot of anecdotally about how their colleagues, their friends that are also in business and what they're hearing, but it's good to hear from someone like you as a professional in this and who hears about it every day. And maybe Dale, I think this sort of this maybe again drives nicely into a question I've got for you here in terms of we've been talking about a little bit about understand what drives value in individual companies that are where their owners are thinking of divesting. But as a buyer and as an investor, how do you think about what drives value and what would make an investor or a buyer pay a premium for this company for company X versus company Y? How do you approach the topic of value at CBGF?
Yeah, sure. Happy to handle that. So there's a lot that goes into it, but we really spend a lot of our time on they're probably the two most difficult things to assess. So the first is what causes us to pay a premium is great people above anything else. And because it's people that create terrific strategies and great products and great companies overall. And there's a lot that goes into those three things, but trying to keep it relatively high level. But it's been strength beyond the founder, right? Especially if you're looking to sell your company. So, because if you're leaving, it's ironic that the better your team and the more irrelevant you are as the founder, the more valuable the company will be. Because if it's all around you, the buyer's always going, oh man, how much of that business is in the founder's head that we have to compensate for when we buy it? But the more you can show a strong team around you, the better. And frankly, from an investor standpoint, evaluating people and team dynamic and team culture is hard. So that's why we like to spend lots of time with people before we invest. That's our model. But I'd say most investors, they try to back the people and then they try to figure out the rest later. And I guess another point related to that, if you're staying around and you want to be engaged in the business going forward, like say you partnered with us, who we want our partners to stay around when we buy a minority stake, you want to show a strong team and that you're still really engaged to drive things forward. The second part that we try to assess, which causes us to pay a premium, is does your company currently, or can it be something strategically important in your industry? And this is different for every company in every industry, but the test is, are you building something, whether it's something unique in terms of process or product, or it's hard to replicate, or you own some key part of the inputs or supply or a distribution network that makes you unique? Because if you're the business that, you keep beating the bigger players in your industry, or if you're the player that, someone's worried, like someone in corporate development would be worried they lose their job if they didn't get a chance to buy you, then you're going to get a premium, like no questions asked. And you know what? Those are difficult, but we're talking about big premiums. If not, and you run a good business that isn't strategically important, you'll get a fair price at exit. And the only way to get a premium there is if you can time the market right, and that's really hard. But those are the two things that really create premium from an investor's standpoint.
Yeah, you're right, Dale. Good people are what typically drives a business. However, a successful business also needs good process and technology. And the three levers work together to create value. COVID has accelerated technology adoption by 5 to 10 years. Those that have thrived and survived the pandemic have leveraged technology to evolve their business models, improve the user experience, maximize operational efficiencies through digital transformation and enablement. Technology shouldn't be considered a cost center, but a strategic business partner. And aligned with Dale's comments, buyers and sellers need to assess their strengths, weaknesses, and the ability to innovate. You need to determine your value proposition, identify the gaps and opportunities, and factor in your stage in life. How much energy do you have left, and your financial position. If you're looking to invest, think big, transformational, innovate through Industry 4.0. How do you improve the customer experience, the value chain, products and services? If you're looking to divest, think more tactically on increasing efficiencies and cleaning up what you have to make it more attractive to a buyer, and focus on seamless integration. Those that embrace technology and align it with people and process will drive value to compete or command a premium if they're selling. Those that don't will struggle and be displaced by the competition, or have to discount during an exit. And as Dale mentioned, it's not easy to time the market.
Thanks for that, Matt. That's really interesting. And I know, probably what I'm assuming that a lot of our audience is thinking about is, now might not be the right time to invest in technology, and thinking about that, just given the uncertainty we have in this world from the COVID perspective and this pandemic that we're all living through. So maybe, Paul, maybe I'll turn this next question to you. What is the current landscape of, for funding, including government incentives to support investment in Canada? Is there a pronounced focus on IT, technology, automation, and other digital strategy? What are you seeing in your practice?
Well, thanks, Jamie. As you can imagine, government support and government funding is a constantly changing landscape, and certainly in 2020, this has been a unique year for everyone. I remember back at the beginning of March, I was reporting on government announcements almost on a daily basis in terms of initiatives that were coming out to support employees, support specific companies, all different things, and that went to weekly announcements and then monthly announcements. And then the government circled back to start cleaning up and fine-tuning these programs to make them more effective as they went on. And certainly in the early days, the focus was all about the immediate need to fight COVID-19. And so there was some specific programs at the federal and at the provincial level that were put in place for specific PPE production, developing new ventilators, getting ventilators in volume out into the field, new tracking technologies, and creating new medical facilities where it was needed. And we were pretty proud from our team perspective to be able to support our clients in helping them get funding for these various initiatives and to actually see them be successful and really making a difference in the battle that we all faced. So going forward, what are we looking at? Well, we've got an economic restart. People are looking beyond where we are today with the announcements in terms of vaccinations and the rollout of that. And obviously, this is going to be a start and stop type thing. We're going to have hiccups along the way. We're going to have problems in different regions. But overall, I think we all need to start looking a little bit ahead. And what is this economic restart going to look like? And what does that mean to our business? And I think on November 30th, from a federal government point of view, we're going to hear their fiscal update. And we're looking forward to, a definition of new investments to support future growth and how Canadian companies can be competitive both domestically and on a global stage. We all kind of know what the priorities of the government are. These initiatives obviously for addressing climate change and environmental concerns. So this is all going to lead to new opportunities for manufacturing companies, for all companies for that matter, in Canada, to help develop new clean technologies, help in energy reduction, waste reduction, alternative energy solutions, building and construction processes, and new technologies. So, there's going to be a wide range of opportunities that I think that are going to be announced. So we'll have to stay tuned and wait to see what those details are. But that's kind of where the government has hinted at where their focus is going to be. And then certainly from a grassroots point of view, significantly for manufacturing companies, is the ability to adopt digital technologies to help prove our operational efficiencies and drive value. I think what's going on behind the scenes here doesn't get much press these days, but Canada is negotiating and has completed the negotiation of some new trade agreements. We're in talks with UK right now to develop a new trade agreement. We've got our agreement with our friends south of us that has now in place. So all these things these processes are in place. So it's now, how do Canadian companies leverage all of this and benefit from it? And I think, again, we're going to see some new support to help do that, on top of some existing programs that are out there at the federal and provincial level. They've identified funds for regional support to help companies accelerate basically what they're doing. So it's not about doing new; it's about helping to accelerate the plans and initiatives that companies may already have. The big key here is, how do you actually successfully access government funding? And in our experience, one of the weakest links, I guess, in the process of applying for funding is manufacturing companies and their ability to develop a strong business case to be able to clearly, concisely, and be really focused on defining what their project is, what they want to achieve, how they're going to do it, what the timing is, and what the real cost is going to be to do it. And more importantly, what are the future benefits that are going to be generated by this initiative? And that's what gets the attention of these different funding administrators. They've got goals in place, so you have to check the boxes of what they're looking for specifically for the various funds that you're applying for. But out of the root of it is having a robust business case. And in our experience, that's the best way to be successful in accessing government funding.
Cool. Yeah, that's good, Paul. And I have a few minor things, but I agree that, and maybe ironically from an equity investor, that we think entrepreneurs should be looking for the lowest cost of capital first, and then only looking for more expensive things later. So, in order, you should probably be focusing on government programs, which Paul laid out really well there, that if that's what you want and if you can get it. And third, equity only if your growth plans kind of require it, because taking on a partner is a big deal, and you shouldn't do that lightly, because it's we're not free capital and it's not cheap, and not from a dollars and cents standpoint, but also from a relationship standpoint. But just speaking to the types of equity, there are two main buckets of private equity. There's minority equity players like us, which will less than 50% stake, usually almost exclusively leave the entrepreneur and the team in charge of the key decisions of the business. It's a way better fit for people who want to stay actively involved, retain outright control of the business, and kind of work through to an exit with us over time. If you're at a point where you're like, I'm done, I want to sell all or a significant stake in my business, you know what, I don't really care so much about control. I just want to either pass this on to a management team or I want to sell it to an investor. Then there's the buyout private equity investors. That's your option there. So those are the two types: is minority if you want to stay involved, and buyout if you want to sell.
Thanks for that, Dale. I think that's an interesting, viewpoint on how to actually fund a lot of the investments that we've been talking about. I got a couple of questions, but maybe just a note to the audience. We're at about 15 minutes left of our session this afternoon. If there is any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box to the right, and we'd be happy to address those before the end of the session. Maybe just switching topics a little bit and thinking about going back on the M&A topic a little bit. And, as travel has largely curtailed travel in as travel has largely been curtailed in 2020 due to COVID, both day-to-day business operations and M&A activity has gone digital and remote. How have investors been considering IT and cyber diligence as part of their pre-deal evaluations? And how has the M&A process been digitized in the past 8 months? Do you think that part of this digitization is here to stay when things go back to what I hope is normal and whatever that new normal will look like? Hopefully sooner rather than later. Not that that's a commentary on when I think that's going to happen, but maybe you can start there with a little bit in terms of what you're seeing from an M&A perspective and how it's been digitized.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jamie. So, in terms of the M&A process, a lot of the work that we would do during a deal was digital and remote anyway. And it's been that for a while. We work with deal teams, accountants and lawyers and other advisors and businesses across Canada and North America, and frankly globally. So a lot of the work actually hasn't really changed. But for manufacturing businesses in particular, there's always been that element of walking the shop floor and touching, feeling the business, seeing the product, and that part is always hard to get around. While we can do a lot of this work remotely and digitally, there's always a human element of it where people like to sit across the table and they like to talk and get to know the people behind the business, as Dale talked about earlier. And so that element is actually hard to remove entirely. So, a lot of the processes we're working on now, we're replacing a lot of in-person meetings with virtual meetings, video calls. And I think that will be the case as we move forward, particularly for sort of early stage meetings and introductory discussions and early stage discussions. But I'm personally of the view that as soon as we can, especially later stage in a deal process, there's still going to be that kind of people that want to walk the floor and albeit with a mask and do it safely and with distance, actually want to tour the site and see the business in person.
Yeah, no, Cam, I agree with that. Since we started in 2018, we've been doing a lot remotely until we get a little bit further along. But COVID-19's really pushed this for everyone doing it a lot. And what's kind of the only way to do it. I do think it's here to stay, this model, but there is no substitute from our perspective. As we're trying to develop long-term business relationships with people, spending time with them in the shop, meeting all the people, having dinner, that kind of stuff. It's really hard to do that over Zoom. It's impossible to do it properly. So we're managing the best we can, but we're trying. And just another point on Jamie's question around, is there more focus on IT and cyber? I think it's been something investors have always been focused on. I think, again, COVID-19 has highlighted its importance and accelerated it a little bit. The one thing that we notice, you can have the best cybersecurity suite in the world. If you don't have good training with your people on the social engineering piece of hacking and phishing, it doesn't waste it. But if someone hacks me, for example, and I accidentally type in my password, I've just given away the keys to the castle, regardless of all the other things you have in place. And I know Matt can probably speak to Dale-proofing IT security. But that's the big thing we've learned in our shop and with others. Like, they do all this work on the expensive stuff, and if you forget to do the training, I'll let you talk to that, Matt. That's more of your world than mine.
Thanks, Dale. I think I'm going to put that one in my back pocket. Dale proofing. I love it. We hear about cyber breaches every day in the news from recognized organizations. In a globally connected economy, we're all targets, and Cyber surveys have revealed the average number of days organizations are breached before it's even detected is 365. Many manufacturing businesses don't think their data is worth going after, but it is. Or perhaps your business is the weakest link in the supply chain and the means to an end. Many organizations have started to build cyber compliance into their supply chain contracts. As part of our due diligence, or IT due diligence, we focus on assessing your technical debt, including cyber awareness. Is your business still relying on legacy environments, or have you begun the digital transformation journey? Does your business simply add capacity or enhance the value chain through innovation? Do you know what your cyber risks are? Have you mitigated what's reasonable? And what's your incident response plan for when a breach happens? Because it will happen. Keep in mind, this is an ongoing process. And the government continues to increase regulatory reporting requirements and fines levied on companies, owners, and directors. It's no longer acceptable to say, I thought our IT team had it under control. It's your responsibility to ask the right questions and to take action.
And Jamie, maybe if I could just jump in here with a comment as well. Obviously, this is important to every company, but you talk to manufacturing companies and clients, and people are sometimes surprised that, well, I'm a manufacturing company. Why would somebody want to hack me, right? But it happens every day. We hear those stories every day, and this is important from an economic point of view, as well as a business operational point of view. And there are some specific funding that has been put in place just recently this year, towards the beginning of the year, specifically to address cybersecurity issues, to address everything from a technology assessment point of view to see where you're at in terms of the spectrum of being safe, to do that testing, and then the follow-up of that is to implement solutions to help with the overall cybersecurity. But I think the message out there for our manufacturing clients is this isn't just for technology clients, software companies to be worried about. This is a critical issue for all manufacturing companies out there, that everybody has to take steps to be secure.
Thanks for that, Paul, and everybody else, obviously, for those comments. That's really helpful. We're coming on just over 5 minutes left of our discussion this afternoon, and the way I want to sort of leave it with us before we jump into some audience questions is, whether it's the right time for me now to invest or divest as a manufacturing business owner, how do I make sure to realize the value on the path that I choose? And maybe I've refrained from adding my comment here for the most part and letting our panelists speak, but I'll add one thing here I think is really important. To me, to realize value, it's all about planning and execution. It's, selling your business is probably one of the biggest transactions and the hardest things you'll ever do in your life. Don't leave it to the last minute. Give it some thought, give it some planning, and some of the things that to maximize the value, take 3, 4, or 5 years in advance to put things on the right path to go forward. And now's not the time to go through all those different things, but some of those things, and maybe just to trigger on what Dale had mentioned earlier in terms of who is the key team behind you. If it's a business that is where you as the business owner drives a lot of the value and has a lot of the relationships, that's going to be a more difficult business to sell because you need to come along with it. And so, those are just one of many things to think about, is how do you make sure you have the right people in place? So, those are some of my thoughts. It's all about planning and some forethought, some foresight into looking at maximizing the value of your business. But maybe Dale, do you want to chat about what you think, where you've seen the most value come from your the companies that you invest in? What have they done?
Yeah, so I kind of think of this in two ways. Is if you have a short, Jamie, I agree with you. Divest is like a 3 2 to 3 plus year process, because there's a lot of things to do and to plan it out if you want to optimize it. If you want a bad exit, try and do it in 9 months, right? But if you have a short divest timeline, I'm not saying this because BDO is hosting this. I sincerely believe this. You need to hire a good advisor as early as possible. They've done it 100 times. They know what to think about, everything from positioning the business to investments you might have to make in the real short term, how to optimize, and through tax, how to optimize whatever the result is, right? And hopefully it's optimizing a great result. If you have a longer term investment horizon, I agree with everything Jamie said. It's just, plan, it's ready, aim, fire, right? Not the other way around. Like, just think about what you're trying to do and how you're going to do it, make the investments, and then when your time to sell, go back to hire the advisor piece and optimize your exit.
So maybe, Jamie, if I can jump in, just in terms of how to maximize value. To me, it goes back to my point about market value in a way. It's about alignment, and that understanding and alignment between what drives value in your business and what gets focus and what gets strategic focus sort of every day and year to year. And I also think about alignment between the stakeholders in the business. They can be awkward conversations or they can be fine conversations, but they should be early conversations about, whether it's, this year or whether it's 10 years or 5 years from now, thinking about the succession plan and the eventual exit from a business and having alignment amongst the shareholders and stakeholders, I think is really important to maximize value.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you need to have a vision and a plan. Define your key initiatives, the activities and the KPIs to get there. You need to monitor and measure, recognize that the world continues to evolve, and you need to be agile and adapt accordingly.
And I think just to echo the theme here of being proactive and having a longer term vision, it's never more frustrating than we talk to a client that says, "Hey, I just bought a piece of equipment," or "I just wrote a purchase order for a piece of equipment, and can you help me get funding for it?" And these funding programs take 3, 6, 9 months, and in some instances to get through the administrative process to get approval. And it's just a shame when companies spend the money and they had the opportunity to access some support that was available to them. But you've got to have that longer term vision. You got to be proactive. You've got to be aggressive. At the end of the day, it's a competition for funds out there, and the best business case wins for those that can do it properly.
Thanks, guys, for that. That's really helpful. But I think we've more or less used up our time here. So maybe with the last 30 seconds, I'll just wrap up this panel discussion. So thank you very much for joining, Dale. Thank you for joining this BDO Rethink conference today. Your time here has been much appreciated. And to the BDO members of the team, thanks for taking the time again this afternoon. And to all of you audience members, I know this going to a online virtual conference is a little bit different than what everyone is used to, but I really hope that you found this time this afternoon, not only our last 45 minutes together, but the rest of the day helpful, enjoyable, and that you've learned something that you can take forward. As we go deeper into the second wave of this pandemic, and more broadly of things to think about as you run your businesses day to day. So hopefully that gives everybody some thought as to things to think about and how to think about that invest or divest dilemma that all business owners go through at some point. So with that, we're at 3:30. Thank you very much for your time. And there is some information BDO just released in the last couple of weeks, a guide to selling your business that you may want to take a look at, that gives some more guidance and some really good pointers and things to think about how to sell your business, that elaborates a lot on what we spoke about today. So with that, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon and the rest of this conference.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for moderating, Jamie.
Thanks all.
So are we backstage now?